It's great to welcome back Dr. Alexandra Stockwell. So good to see you again, ma'am.
I am so glad to be here on Sexy Marriage Radio.
Yeah, this has been fun. We got to connect earlier when I was on your show again, and so now in the whole guest swap world, this is fun to continue some conversations and then maybe go a slightly different way. And so you were talking about right before we hit record, you've kind of gotten into this world of this thread of intimacy isn't necessarily vibrant, big, passionate move, kiss, gift, extravagant, huge things. It's also little things. So let's unpack that.
Yeah, actually, maybe I'll start. I was preparing for a talk and I randomly put into Claude AI, what are some misconceptions people have about intimacy? And there really are many. I mean, it made sense to me, everyone that Claude generated. And I think the two I want to just start with one is that intimacy is not merely sex.
Hmm.
And also, that intimacy does not just naturally grow as a result of more familiarity. I think any of us who've been married a long time, we know that. And yet, there's still a little bit of an assumption in our culture that, well, you spend more time together, then intimacy grows. And really, that's not necessarily the case. So the
Hmm.
question is, well, how does it grow? And I think when we're really wanting more intimacy, it's easy to go to, well, let me buy an expensive gift or book a romantic getaway. And I'm all for those things. I'm not against grand gestures or kind of dramatic proclamations. But the really sustainable way to build intimacy is to use everyday interactions. Just start with being intentional and say good morning. In my experience, a lot of couples, the day begins and they are off to the races. There's breakfast to do, kids to be made, get to the gym, all of that. And it really takes what, 2 whole seconds, possibly three, to find your spouse, slow down, put attention on them, look them in the eyes, say good morning,
Hmm.
and then move on with the day. And I think that throughout the day, we have all of these opportunities that do not take much clock time, but they do take an internal pivot. And
Hmm.
that's the inertia that has to be broken. What do you think
So
about that?
I love the idea. Then it just boils down to how because you think about it, we are such routine creatures. We are such this is just kind of what it is, or we are such protective creatures in the sense of, well, I've tried. I mean, I hear this a bunch. You probably too. When I'll bring up something with a couple, they're like, "Yeah, we've tried that before." It's like, hang on, let's talk about a little bit deeper of this statement. But there is this element of, yeah, I have tried to be more intentional, and they just blew me off, and so it's just that. So what you're describing is how do we get even more intentional to try something again that maybe didn't work the first time and maybe it could this time, but it's still an element of how do I change my normal everyday hurried to implement a few of these small little touch point moments better, because that's where the rubber's going to meet the road, right?
Absolutely. And actually, I want to share my favorite, we've tried that already story.
Go.
I gave a talk, this was years ago before the pandemic for sure, because it was an in person talk. And it was, I don't remember what the title was, something about how to talk so your spouse will listen or something like that. And I shared my framework for making vulnerable communications in order to experience more emotional intimacy. There was a woman in the audience who came up to me afterwards. Her husband is in tech and she was a corporate executive, both of them introverted, very not emotional people. I mean, a lot of love, but just not expressive people. And so she said, I have tried to have vulnerable communications and shared from my heart with my husband, and he just doesn't respond. So I said, then you need to be more vulnerable, modeling it as I say it now, just slowing down, coming from a more risky but also more open hearted place. So she kind of rolled her eyes and was like, well, I'll try it. And then just coincidentally, we happened to meet 3 weeks later at an event. She was there, I was there, and she came up to me. This is a very like buttoned up woman with like a tear in her eye. And she shared with me that she and her husband were sitting on the couch, and very simply, she became a lot more vulnerable than she ever have had. And she said to him, sometimes when I'm with you, I feel unimportant. And to her total surprise, he turned to her and slowly said, me too. And it was the most vulnerable moment of their 32 years of marriage. And so the reason I share that is that we can say, well, I've already tried it and it doesn't
Hmm.
work. And yes,
Hmm.
that is a very common response, especially because you and I are not doing rocket science. We're giving basic ideas. And once you've mastered it, it seems so simple. And even when you hear about it, you can think, well, that's no big deal. But actually, in the implementation, there is more depth. So I'm going to get back to the practical question, but I wanted to share that because I think if you've tried it and you think it hasn't worked, maybe try it differently.
Right. Yeah. That's
Because if you're
the thing
talking
I
about
keep.
it and I'm talking about it, it's a reliable tool that's going to work for the vast majority of people.
Absolutely. That's what I tell them too, is like, okay, so sure, you have probably said the words, but the manner in which you are present or engaged, or in your case, an example, vulnerable in the saying of the words, carries a lot more weight than the words.
That is right. And our spouses consciously or unconsciously perceive all of that. Okay, so how to actually use the moment to be more connected. I think the first thing is to pick a moment that is very routine, like saying good morning or saying good night, or when one of you leaves for work, or I don't know, when you reconvene at the end of the day. Like it could be anything. When it's
Hmm.
time to brush your teeth for that matter, although I'm not quite sure how I'm going to illustrate my point with that one, but the thing is that when you cross paths, like it's easiest to do this in moments of transition. It's actually, if you're already, it may sound easier if you're already sitting together on the couch watching Netflix, then you can turn and initiate something. But I find it's simpler to introduce a new habit at times of transition. And what I mean by that is starting the day, ending the day, leaving for work, coming back, the kids are put to bed. There are just many, many moments where there's a transition, and we tend to just sail right through our transitions without being intentional. So, how to actually do it? The first thing is to slow down, center yourself, become more mindful, more in the present moment. So, how to do that? Well, just pause and focus on a few deep breaths. You may have other ways of doing it, but that's just a simple way to get started. And then once grounded, once present with yourself, your mind isn't a few steps ahead for what your next tasks are, and it's not stuck behind because something didn't go the way you wanted, but just being in the present moment. And then from there, putting attention on your spouse. There's no fancy script. There aren't magical words to say. It's not these words, but it's basically conveying, I see you. I'm here
Hmm.
with you, which comes through in good morning. It comes through with, I'm glad you're home. How was your day? Rather than, you know, if you say to your spouse when they get home, how was your day? And they say it was fine. Well, maybe they're just it's fine kind of guy, but maybe you could ask differently so that they realize you're actually asking a different question. Like, how was your day? The answer is, it was fine. Then you can say, well, what was something that sticks out during your day?
Mhm.
It's presence, and then when necessary, curiosity. And let me just say that if you can cultivate the kind of presence that creates intimacy and connection in the everyday moments, well, first of all, you get more intimacy. And as I love to say, in the context of a long-term relationship, everything which isn't sex functions as foreplay, bringing you a little closer together or a lot, or pushing you a little or a lot further apart. So use these everyday moments to come a little closer together. But also, if you can be present, kind of clear your mind and be grounded, be present, and bring your attention to your spouse when you say good morning, well, that is a very useful skill that translates fairly seamlessly into sexual experiences as well.
Mhm.
This is a skill to develop in really benign moments that could just pass by, but it will bring dividends in
Mhm.
other contexts.
Mhm. Yeah, because what I'm hearing you describe, Alexandra, is this idea of how do you get better at realizing your own level of presence to try to cultivate better presence together.
Yes, and I think that one's own quality of presence is the first step in
Mhm.
experiencing intimacy together.
Yeah, because sometimes I think we come into a situation and the way we've positioned ourselves is I need something from them. And it could be a benign statement of how was your day, but what I'm needing is the conversation, the feedback. And so what actually is being communicated is I need you to talk to me rather than I'm really interested in what happened with you. And those are two different motivations or
Yes,
processes.
yes, they are. And I guess I also think if I have the need for conversation and connection, sometimes I might say, I need connection and conversation, or convey it indirectly, but essentially that's the communication. My own style is to focus on making it an invitation that your spouse would like to participate in. So I think it can get kind of like weird if I'm asking my husband to tell me about his day because I need that, then that gets a little, it's like it's his day. It's up to him to share it. He shouldn't need to share about his day for me. But if it's an invitation that I make in a way that he's actually glad to respond, this is something particularly with women, although also men, I really enjoy teaching how to ask for what you want so that it feels really good to give it to you. And it's not a fancy technique as much as when you want something, think about what would make it great for your partner to want to say yes, other than because you're being bratty or demanding or entitled. Like, those are not
Right.
motivating flavors.
Yeah, because that's again, that's the same concept of realizing how often we have this self-fulfilling prophecy in how things unfold in my dynamic in a relationship, particularly in a marriage, but I think this is everywhere, but for sure in a
Yes,
marriage is
yes,
where
I
it can be
agree.
seen even more, is I've almost set up the stage to invite the result I'm gonna get, and so I need to change the way I am setting up the stage, not just hope it's gonna change.
Yeah, and it can feel so confronting because a couple can be trapped in a co-created dynamic, but to the individual, it feels like if only my partner would change.
Mhm.
When really both people need to change. And sometimes it happens simultaneously, but more often one person has to go first. Something that I know you have a lot to say about.
Well, we were talking about when I was on your show. Yes.
Exactly, exactly, and a whole book on the topic. I think it's so wonderful that you're writing that because I don't know if that's, a childhood attitude or what that is, but it can feel so risky to go
Hmm.
first and then be disappointed. But if you're waiting for your partner to go first, often things just don't happen.
Well, and here's the thing that's so interesting about that dilemma. If you look at it objectively, so I'm afraid to go first about something. I'm afraid to set the stage and say good morning. Let's continue on this example
Yes,
because
yes, yes.
I think it being that inane in some ways we can make it so much more profound still. You know,
Yes.
we can take the small and make them meaningful. And so if I feel like, all right, so if I say it and they don't actually respond well or they blow me off, I'll feel hurt, I'll feel rejected. But what's motivating me to also even want to think about doing something different is I already feel a little bit of hurt or rejected or alone. So I'm hurt and rejected and alone either way at this current state. So if I let fear ruin it or, rule it, I'm not going to say anything. If I say something and I don't get what I want, to me, it's the cleaner. I took a step towards something I'm really hoping we can create together. And at least it's real. At least it's me handling myself differently. That in and of itself is a win to me. That's a huge victory to me.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you're pointing to because if you want more connection in your marriage, then go for it. There's no win in not going for it. There's some entitled righteousness, but there's no marital win in not
Right.
going for it. And something like good morning, your spouse may be cranky, may be stressed and grumpy, may get out of bed at the last moment and just feel like they don't have time. You still are making a positive difference in cultivating intimacy if you consistently take a breath, look your partner in the eyes if they're not moving too fast that you can't,
Hmm.
and just with an intentional tone, even if you're saying it to their back the first few times, good morning.
Hmm.
It's actually, you know, I'm pretty good about saying good morning, but it wasn't really a high priority until, I mean, it wasn't a low priority. It just wasn't something that I really had attention on until I gave a talk a few weeks ago and I was looking for something actionable that really anyone could do.
Hmm.
Like, you don't need equipment, you don't need time, you don't need money, you don't need technique. Like, as long as you have like the mental capacity to think and articulate good morning, you are fully equipped to do this really well. But because I use that as an actionable example of everyday ways to cultivate intimacy, I've been aware of it with my husband. And
Hmm.
I gave the talk for him to hear it, so he has too. And it's gotten to where saying good morning is very quick. We're both busy in the mornings, but this super rich moment in the landscape of our relationship because those 2 seconds are so juicy and potent, and sometimes it's a more hot romantic kiss, sometimes it's not even a kiss, but it's connecting, it's cultivating intimacy, and it means the other end of the day, we are reconnecting, not finding one another as husband and wife for the first time that day.
Yeah, and I think it even can go because I'm just thinking of all the different contexts this is applicable. Even just this concept of the good morning. Because immediately somebody in the nation is going to be, yeah, but my spouse is gone before I even am up. Yeah, but all of us have these yeah buts, right? We actually have an episode from way, way back in the archives called "How Big Is Your Butt?" Because we always
With
have
one T.
buts, right? We always have buts in our lives
Yes.
of like,
Yes.
yeah, but even this whole thing you're describing is the idea of, so what if my normal text pattern I'll personalize it with me. What if my normal text pattern with Pam was when I'm gone before her, or I'm not around, or she's not around, we only first reach out to each other when there's something we need to, hey, here's the details on what my schedule is today, is to make sure you know when I'm coming back, or here's what needs to happen with the
Or if you
kid,
go shopping, could you pick up some
or
extra
hey,
shampoo?
do you know where this is, or all that stuff.
Yeah.
What if I make a habit that just changes it up, and it's just a simple text of good morning, and that's it, and that, even that is a movement towards.
Absolutely. This applies if you're out of the house first, if one of you works nights. Yes, there's no scenario in which this wouldn't work. And typing out good morning, it's probably, you put the G and the M and autocorrect does the rest. But even if it's not actually good morning and it's just like a heart each morning, that minuscule amount of intention, it's a minuscule amount of time and attention, it's a big amount of intentionality, but it's that kind of small shift that creates culture change, meaning your marital culture becomes fundamentally more intimate, more caring, which feels good to our hearts and lubricates the way to other parts.
Oh, that's really good, because I think then you're starting to look at it in the context of, how am I cultivating something I'm wanting to create? How am I changing my stance? Because I use the phrase of, every system is designed perfectly to get the results it gets.
Mm,
And so if
yes.
I don't like the result I'm getting, I need to change my part of the system. And even just these small little steps is a changing of my system, because I'm changing me. I'm changing my dance steps and how I am being a part of this dynamic. And when I position myself better that way, I'm changing it somehow. Hopefully it culminates in something that I'm really wanting, but I'm still just changing me. And that's still a win. And I don't think we need to overlook that.
Yeah, that's really true. And let's say, I don't know, you're a man, you leave for work early, you send a good morning text. Your wife has young kids and frantic mornings, and so she wakes up in the morning, she sees the text, but she doesn't respond, and
Hmm.
she responds later. That is a win too. Like, the
Hmm.
point is moments of connection when they're available, not as a burden, but as an opportunity that's squandered if it doesn't happen.
No, that's really good, because then you're just talking about, how am I dealing with me better, which that's the
How am I
language I
dealing with
love.
me? And how is that an invitation for my partner to engage with me too? But how am I dealing with
Perfect.
me as the way to do so?
Perfect. So, Alexandra, as we're wrapping up the first segment, how can people find more about you, so that way they know how to get more of what it is that your mission is, because it's really worth aligning for.
Okay, well, if you want more on how to choose intimacy, alexandrastockwell.com. That's my website. And from there, you can find my podcast, my episodes with you on the Intimate Marriage Podcast, my book, just all of my courses, all of this stuff. You can find it at alexandrastockwell.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much again, and I'm excited. I got an idea for where we're going to go with the extended content, so
Good. I can't wait.
this could be fun. Thanks a lot, Alexandra.
Thank you. Glad to be here.